All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is September 9th, 2019 City of Hartwell Council meeting. Thank you for coming. We've got a good little crowd here. Got some big stuff on the agenda. If you'll just bow your head, I'll say a quick prayer and we'll do a pledge. Heavenly Father, we come to you now. We just thank you for the many great things that are going on in our community. So many hardworking folks and volunteers, and we just ask for your continued blessings on all that happens here in our community. We especially need the wisdom tonight as we discuss big topics and make big decisions for the community now and for the future. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Please stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. A couple quick mayor's comments. Did want to tell council I intend to appoint a gentleman named Oscar L. Brock to the Housing Authority under my purview. This is the one-year appointment for a resident of the Housing Authority. He showed interest. As you know, it's really hard to get folks to want to do this. This is a thankless job. But Oscar L. Brock of Hartwell lives in the properties there, and I intend to appoint him with a signature here momentarily. Is there a reason? Does anybody have a question or major concern? Okay, just want to make sure. I'm going to read a letter to you that I think will be encouraging and validate kind of what we already know. Dear Mayor Johnson, I write you today to praise the professionalism of the fire department of the city of Hartwell. On August 29, 2019, we had a misfortune at our home to experience a small fire in our kitchen. My wife was able to contain it before it got too bad, but it was a very traumatic event for her. The city of Hartwell Fire Department was called by our security company, and they were on the scene within minutes. The professionalism shown by the 3 firefighters who came to our home was exemplary and greatly appreciated by not only my wife, but me as well. They stayed on the scene much longer than I would have thought necessary. They checked my wife out to make sure there was no smoke inhalation injuries. There was no way that they could have been any more kind to my wife and me at the time. I suspect that most letters of this sort to your office are complaints of service that does not meet a citizen's expectations. Please know that firefighters, and here's their names, we appreciate them, Bobby Lewis, Jonathan Miller, and John Moore, went above and beyond as far as my wife and I are concerned. I just wanted to express our thanks to be sure that you and the rest of the citizens of Hart County are aware of the excellent fire department we have. This is signed by Mr. Tash Van Dora. So I thought that was a neat, he's right. We don't get a whole lot of attaboys, but on occasion we do, and we want to just say thank you to these firemen and the whole department. I think we got our ISO rating back just recently. We're a low 2. A 2 ISO rating is very good. We're just a couple points away from being a 1. That would put us, less than probably 0.5% of the nation. So we're very close to really having as good of a score as you can get. Chief Vickery does an excellent job. So we appreciate him and his group of hardworking individuals. Briefly, council on GIC. That's the Georgia Institute of Community Housing. And you remember we decided to push forward with the opportunity of maybe getting selected for this housing initiative that will hopefully make us more competitive with development. We, as you know, via email, we were one of 7 finalists out of, I think, 14. We were told we had, I guess it's okay to say, we had the best packet in the state of Georgia as it relates to this application. We're real excited about that. Michelle did a great job, Michelle Weatherby, who's here, and everybody knows Miss Michelle. Works really hard. Yeah, we do appreciate you. Put on a great site visit last week at the Career Academy, and I think everybody was really pleased. Don't you think, Michelle? Anything you want to add? What's our timeline? What do we know?
The official line is that we should hear 1st of October, but I think it's gonna be a little earlier. From some of the comments they made, I think it's probably gonna be at the end of September. And I would like to thank the Hart County School System and Superintendent Jay Floyd for allowing us the use of the community room, and for providing snacks, and to Katichi for giving us a very nice van to tour around town.
Yeah.
But we feel very lucky.
Very good. We appreciate all your hard work. We've got a full group of talented folks that are going to serve on that committee if we're selected, and we believe it'll just make us more attractive to developers. And there's a whole lot of statewide programs and different types of grants and low interest loans that'll be available to developers moving forward if we're selected. So fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens. Thank you all very much. Item number 4 is to approve the minutes of last month. That is the August 5th meeting. Council, any questions, comments, corrections, anything? Can I get a motion to approve as they are?
Move to approve.
Got a motion by Councilman Kraft to approve as they are. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Griggs to approve the minutes from last month's meeting. Any comment or question? Public comment? All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Okay. John, anything I need to do before we get deep here?
If you want to go to executive session, I'll need to amend the agenda.
Do what?
We don't think we're going to go into executive session for this first topic.
So then you don't need to.
All right.
Yeah, can I make a motion to move item number 10
Yes.
to item number 6?
All right. You want to move it up? That's fine.
To executive for that first.
You want to do diversified first and then do
Yeah.
executive session for State Park? All right. Is that okay, Council? Can I get this motion to approve?
Since we're going to executive session, do we just want to do both of them while we're in there?
All right, let's move it up above it. Let's move executive session to item number 5. This will be to discuss real estate and lease of real estate. And we'll be out just as quick as we can, okay?
And then we're gonna move 10 up to 6.
Yes, and then 10 will be back there, okay? Motion to approve the change. Again, I get a motion? Motion by Councilman Hayne to approve that quick change. Second by Councilman Granella. Any public comment or question before we jump back there? All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Okay. Can I get a motion to move into executive session to discuss real estate? All right. Got a motion second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? We'll be right back, folks.
Wait on Bill.
Can I get a motion to move out of executive session?
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Hicks, second by Councilman Kraft to come out of executive session. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Okay. Do I need to get a motion to come back into regular session? Is that actually a necessary motion? I don't think so. All right. First item is diversified golf agreement, which is actually would be considered pilot realty agreement. I think Councilman Haney has a.
I move that we accept the purchase agreement as written with a couple of minor changes that Charlie and I have already discussed, to proceed
All right.
post haste.
Got a motion to approve the contract agreement with Pilot Realty, also known as Charlie Shell and Charlie and Kelly Shell. Can I get a second?
So moved.
Second by Councilman Kraft. Just some brief touches on this. We're obviously really excited about what Charlie has done. He and Kelly have made a big investment in the community. They took a leap of faith to purchase it from HTC, and as you know, he spent a significant amount of money out there. I wish I had my documents with me, but he's got full-scale drawings of what he considers phase 2 of his development, which is going to include some housing, and we're really excited about what that's going to mean. Those are going to be taxable entities, and that's going to be more heads and beds, which is good for him and the community. So it's a win-win. Couple details. The property is going to be purchased through a 10-year agreement, $6,000 a month, and as a reduction, the city will pay the golf course for spray water. It's probably a little bit more detail than y'all need to know, but $6,000 a month over 10 years. So instead of the stated value of $586,000, we'll recoup about $720,000 over that time, plus all property will be taxable and all the improvements. So we're very excited about it. He's a great partner in the community. We see this as a partnership, okay? Any public comment or questions? Michael, we can provide you with some detail if you need to, okay? All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? None on that, okay?
Hey, Mayor, can I request that the council make another motion?
Okay, that's right.
Go
ahead, Trey.
I'd like to make a motion that the payment of $6,000 a month totaling $720,000 annually be put into the Economic Development Fund. Monthly. I thought they were going to do it annually. Monthly be put into the Economic
Okay,
Development.
that's right. Motion by Councilman Hicks to approve that $6,000 a month, the transaction amount, to be able to be seamlessly put into economic development. That's an accounting thing on our side. It gives John and the accounting department the authority to do that, okay? It's just on our side. Second by Councilman McNabb to approve that. Any questions or concerns, public? All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? All right. So we're really excited. We can't tell you how happy we are for Katichi and all the wonderful things that are happening there, okay? All right, item number, it's gonna be actually, I think, a 6. This is Hart State Park discussion. We discussed some things there. We do have our consultant here, Mr. Sean Davis. We'd like for him to come up and just give us just a quick, where are we at? What have we received? And then council's, I think we're gonna intend to have some more discussions about this before we make final decisions, unless we change our mind here momentarily. So please go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me okay. I had come with quite a bit to go through with you and realized, as a lot of your constituents came up and started asking me questions, that maybe what should happen is I talk just a little bit and then take a lot of questions, because I think that your audience got a lot out of the exchange just a few minutes ago, and hopefully some of you will as well. I do bring you good news tonight. Some said it couldn't be done, but we do have an agreed master plan, an agreed prime lease between the Corps and DNR. We also have a sublease between DNR and the city. And next on the list, obviously, would be the sublease with your campground operator. And to your point, Mr. Mayor, what I'm not asking you to think about tonight is actually agreeing to execute these leases, because the campground operator lease has not been finalized. It's not until that is done that you're actually going to know what your obligations might be there at the park. For instance, how much exactly is there to do the front entrance? How much is there to support the campground operator's development plan? And so we've got to sit down with the campground operator next and work through those issues. But first, let me just tell you that this action is going to give you 147 prime acres of shoreline at Lake Hartwell for essentially no investment at all, other than the planning processes that the federal regulations require. In other words, you're not having to acquire anything to get a hold of this 147 acres. And most governments, local governments, when they work these kind of leases out with the federal government, they hold them for decades. And the only consideration you're required to give to the federal government is the actual maintenance and improvements of the infrastructure itself. In other words, you don't have to pay them anything. As the income comes in from the lease, you actually pour it right back into the asset, and that's perfectly fine with the Corps of Engineers. They'll never come around with their hand out asking you for rent income. In fact, at Lake Winter Islands, every dollar's been reinvested, and you've seen something like $50 million go right back into that asset, pumping up the infrastructure, so that it's a self-supporting process. And so I know that, having worked with y'all just in the last year and a half, 2.5 years now, that's been your goal as well, that this be a self-supporting venture, that at the end of the day, you've got a third party that's operating the facilities. You're only providing what a city government should provide, which is infrastructure. You're not actually running the operations yourselves. And so once you give the nod, if you give the nod to proceed to the campground operator discussion, that's the kind of thing we'll be discussing with them. Exactly how much are you going to invest over how much time period? What are going to be the performance requirements? Where will you build the cabins first? How many roads need to be put in there? Are you going to be asking us to put in low pressure sewer or not? The good news is a lot of that engineering is already finished, and we've already priced out most of that. It's just a matter of working through with him exactly what it looks like, how much money would be coming from the city's portion. How do you recover that investment over so many years from the campground operator, and then you capture those things into a sublease agreement. But I guess the best thing I want to share with you tonight is thanks to our friends at Georgia Department of Natural Resources in supporting us in this effort. They have supported the lease. They have given us the okay that they're ready to execute it when you're ready to execute it. I want to thank Congressman Doug Collins' office in particular. We ended up having some I would say some impasses, some disagreements with the Corps of Engineers, and we ended up having to have the Congressman's office intervene on our behalf on the civil side of the U.S. Army, and that helped us get through that process and get the leases that we achieved. There is a letter that I've sent you, and I don't know if y'all brought copies tonight, but that letter outlines for you all the different the key lease provisions that we negotiated. And then it also gives you a sequence of events if you decide to go forward now as to how you should proceed with respect to the sequence of the sublease agreement, the campground operator discussions, the bonded indebtedness. By the way, we have confirmed with DNR that all the bonds have been paid off during this process. And so at one point, y'all might recall, that was like $80,000. Move it along.
The mouse.
Well, there's nothing to show yet anyway. At any rate, so what I've given you in this letter is also some estimates for what that takes to move forward, and hopefully by the end of the year, we would have, again, the Corps is not involved any longer. This is between us and the campground operator. So the concerns about variability and changes in scope and changes in agreements with the Corps and them blocking things, that's behind us for the most part, because what the agreements say with the Corps is that any subleases below that, between DNR and the city, and between the city and the campground operator, any of those, they cannot withhold consent unreasonably. And so what that means is they're not a party to those agreements, but they do get to review them. And so they'll review them, and as long as they don't see something that somehow is in conflict with the prime lease, then they have to approve it. So that's the good news. You'll see in here the coastal resources study, what that's about. That was came out of the negotiations with the Corps. Normally with federal actions, permitting processes underneath the National Environmental Policy Act, it requires you to do an initial data search for cultural resources. It doesn't require you to go out in the field and do any intrusive work. Well, if you do new work now in areas where it's not been previously disturbed, there is now an expectation you get what's called a phase 1 coastal resources survey, which is you still do the data exercise, but say that you find there's 4 or 5 sites out there that might have some cultural resources, then you have to go out and do a little bit more intrusive work to make sure that there's nothing there. That I did get the quote on that. The exact quote, this was my estimate, was $25,000. The exact quote is $28,500 to do the cultural resources survey. You do not have to spend that now. You can spend that once you're comfortable that we have an agreement with the campground operator. So take that off the list. Engineering fees, we've done most of the engineering work. That could end up being half that. I really don't know. But given what's happened with the scope expansions that we've seen working with the feds and others, I've got an estimate of $10,000. Legal fees, we know we're going to have probably as much as $15,000 in legal fees to negotiate this with the lawyer that's going to be representing the campground operator. And then, of course, we'll be working with your counsel as well. I've also given you a timeline for September through January. The goal here is for the campground operator to take possession of the property first of next year. And so again, the part with the federal government's behind us. This is all going to be the timeline that you're under control with now. You control the timeline, not the feds any longer. So those are just some preliminary comments, and it may be best just to go through some of the Q&A. I will tell you that when we get to the discussion with Barry Stern, the campground operator, many of you participated in the work sessions we had on infrastructure, and it was in those work sessions where all those expenses were detailed in terms of all the engineering estimates for all the infrastructure and sewer and all of those things. They were some big numbers at first, $3 and $4 million to actually do the whole property in the sewer system, and then to provide the kind of support you see to develop that master plan. What we will be doing in the alternative, however, is whatever initial infrastructure that's necessary at the entrance, for instance, and things like that, that would be paid for, at least 50% of it, by the campground operator over 10 years, as with the initial infrastructure that's there to support the initial development plans that he's going to have for development and so forth. And so the point of the exercise is, at the end of the day, we give you back, probably in the December meeting, this is how much the rent income is going to generate from the campground operator. This much of it's going to pay for the debt service for the investment that you're going to make. This much pays for what you've invested up to now. And the whole goal would be that you get a return on your investment over a 10-year period. And after that point, it's a matter of, just like at Lake Leonard Islands, the developer may come to you, he's humming along, and you know what? He's hitting 50 and 70% occupancy. Guess what? He wants to invest in another 20 cabins. Okay, well, what's that going to require? So then you look at, okay, his investment of 20 cabins is going to require a new road. It's going to require this sewer line or this or that. And then y'all get to sit there and expand the park however you choose at that point. So that's the kind of information that we'll be bringing you in December. But at this point, all that is being asked of you now is to give the nod on proceeding based on the prime lease and the sublease, not asking you to execute it. And then we bring back to you the campground operator sublease that would have in it the actual financials, the lease income, what your obligations are going to be, and so forth.
So currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, counsel, in its current form today, what we call a Hart State Park is actually Hart Recreation Area. Am I right? It's no longer considered a state park on their website, I guess. In approximately 2009 is when they had budget cuts and made a decision to, for the most part, pull out of the state park. Now, they have kept the grass maintained, but there's significant deterioration of assets there, such as the little store, the ranger houses, the front entrance. I know the bathrooms are in bad shape, and the roads are in bad shape. So, and over that period of time, I think the state's done the minimum, which comes along with budget cuts, right? I guess that's correct. We don't have any, I guess, proof that that's going to change necessarily in the near future, and we certainly don't know if it would be a long-term change, such as reverse course. I mean, some of our folks here are from Hartwell forever, and you can remember the glory days of the state park probably. We could probably hear some stories of that. We don't foresee that ever happening on the state's watch. We appreciate them for it, for what they do, but so just kind of setting the stage. Now, so current state, if it continues, over 50 more years, we know what we'll have potentially. What does the plan, going from what we currently have on the ground, what's the sublease, the campground, what's he wanting to do?
Sure. It is important to note that right now, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources has been operating under a master plan that was done decades ago, and it does not include cabins on it or any of the things that we have here. So even Georgia DNR, if they wanted to do anything other than this passive, primitive, some RV camping approach, they too would have had to gone through the exact same exercise that y'all just went through. And you're correct, Mayor. It's what's referred to as an outdoor recreational area. It's no longer a state park. The difference being that an outdoor recreational area is much more passive. You still do some booking, and sometimes there's some online booking and things like that, but it's very few services provided by the state in that scenario. And I'm not aware of any major investments that DNR has planned for Hart State Park. I know that they've been making some recent investments simply because they were unsure whether or not this was actually going to happen. And quite frankly, it wasn't until a week ago that any of us knew for sure it was going to happen. And suddenly the finding of no significant impact landed in our email box and it was signed. And what that basically means is it's all over. The This master plan you were just asking about, that was contained as part of an environmental assessment. Y'all remember I brought you notebooks this time? That's all approved. And what the master plan basically calls for is to take what are now, as I said, some primitive camping areas and some small RVs, and you would end up having 88 total. 31 of those would be new. 88 total camping sites that would now either be high-end RV, meaning the very long concrete pads with new pedestals out there for connection. It would either be RVs, camping, or the chickees sites. Those are the primitive type sites with the tiki huts and suspended beds, and people like these things. And then the RV model, campground models, RV park models. I know that that's something that KOA has been very popular with, the KOA destinations, and so those would also be in the plan. We have the concert venues, which right now, what you see, the Great Lawn, that's actually part of a very large septic system where all of the low-pressure sewer lines would run to that area. So that once the hotel comes online and can be supported by a market study, you'd bring in force main and then reconnect into this Great Lawn area, and therefore you haven't lost any of that investment running the low-pressure sewer lines. But we do anticipate the hotel is going to be several years out before the market can support a hotel on this property. It's going to take all these RV campground models to come online. It's going to take all these high-end RVs, the stores, the restaurant that's out on the point, that was approved in the master plan as well. All kinds of docks, event venues have been approved on the master plan, so that the second operator, that would be the second sublease that you would move to negotiate. That person would then take his share of the infrastructure costs, and he would then install his own development there, much like the campground operator, putting in the event venues and things like that. So that would be the next step.
And on the cabins, existing and what is proposed, what's the differences in those numbers?
Well, as you know, there's only 5 cabins that are existing now, and they're in pretty bad shape, and the renovations of those are also in the infrastructure estimates for the campground, for the event venue operator. If he chose to move forward with those and use those for the weddings, is really what the idea was there. And then you would have as many cabins as 44 new cabins. And basically anything that you see in white is an RV area or campground park model area, and everything you see in yellow rectangular shapes is a new cabin area. Any roads you see in yellow are new roads that have been approved. So the nice thing about having the approved master plan, and there's a utility infrastructure plan that goes with this master plan you don't even see here, which is a very exhaustive utility plan that goes with it to support everything you see on the drawing. And that's important because the process that we worked out with the Corps in the lease documents is that you say that you're ready to start building 5 cabins, or say that you're ready to put in the sewer system. You bring the Corps what's called a site plan, and you show this. It's not unlike what y'all see when a builder comes and brings you grading plans. They're supposed to, within 30 days, give the nod. They can't unreasonably withhold approval. Again, that same provision was put in there. And I can tell you that we don't have any issues getting site plans approved. If we've ever had an issue, it's because there's a grade issue they questioned or something. But the engineering sufficiency they're not involved in, unless, as I said, the grade is massive and it's going to cause a major erosion and sediment control issue. They're not involved in that either. They're just making sure that when the site plan comes in and says, I'm ready to build here, that it actually matches the master plan, so that they know they've complied with the NEPA standards at the federal level, so that somebody can't come in and sue them and say that we're building something that's not on the master plan. So that would be the process. And so the whole idea here is again, I know that y'all have been very sensitive to making sure that you're only providing the infrastructure to the park, but the private operator is the one taking the risk in terms of the development that's revenue producing. And so what we'll be bringing you back is, what does that look like? How much of your investment are you going to recover? for going through this planning process. How much of the debt service for providing the public infrastructure is he going to cover over how many years? How much rent income are you going to get? What are the performance requirements? What does he got to do to, if he's going to be asking for a 25-year lease, you're giving 50. But say that you were to give the campground operator 25 years. What's he going to do years 1 through 5? What's he going to do years 10 through 15? Because you don't want them parked on the property and not doing the investment and holding a long-term lease. Those are kind of things you'll see next. And those are things between you and that campground operator. As long as it's consistent or not inconsistent with the core lease, then that's going to be between you two.
Couple brief things, and I'll open it up in case other council members have questions. We are discussing, or we have had this same gentleman on board from pretty well day one, or at least pretty well shortly after. In your many conversations with him, I'm sure, and some of the folks who represent him, how confident are you that we can somehow get a return on investment that makes sense after, I'm sure there's been some preliminary discussions and some things, just ballparks. I mean.
Well, to be clear, I'm not your attorney, but as I understand your posture, you have awarded him the ability to negotiate. He's not been chosen. He's just been preliminarily selected for negotiation. And so the posture I think you're in, you're going to sit there and negotiate with him on the very points you're talking about. I will tell you that based on the infrastructure that you would be installing, based on the investment you've already made up to now, based on the development he wants to put in, and the kind of rent payment he's comfortable making, it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of $100,000, somewhere in there, depending on what he installs and what his revenue looks like.
A year?
I will, yes, sir. I will tell you that we do intend to put in provisions that also will capture making sure you have a piece of the revenue as well. What you often see with these leases is a base rent position, a minimum rent, if you will, which would cover the things I've talked about. And then there'll be a certain threshold that if he reaches it in business, does really well, he just takes off. Well, normally what you would see is a percentage rent come on top of the minimum rent as well. And that's what you have at Lake Lanier, that's what you have at other places as well. That way, if it really takes off, you're benefiting from that too. And the more revenue you get in, the more infrastructure you can invest in.
Yeah, that money has to be spent back in that park.
Yeah, I can't stress that any income you get from this can only go towards specific things that are in the lease, which are basically the administration of that lease. In other words, if you've got some bookkeeping here that needs to be charged to it, public safety of that area, if in fact you have to spend more dollars to have public safety out there, the infrastructure itself, so the operation expense, and you can't subsidize the operator either under the lease terms. So that's why there's got to be very clear lines about public infrastructure versus revenue producing infrastructure that he's got to invest in.
Sean, obviously this, we feel somewhat, some would say very confident, others probably not as much, pretty confident in the ability to execute with this one gentleman. Originally way back in the day when we kind of started this thing, we sent it out for public interest and it was pretty scarce, but some of that was we did have a lease that they could go off of. Do you foresee there being any real additional interest from outside other parties at whatever point things
There's
start
no
happening?
question. And then let me tell you a story about Lake Lanier Islands again. You had a private developer who had control of the entire Lake Lanier Islands. They got acquired by a very large resort operation. And no longer was that resort operation, no longer was this really in their portfolio, Lake Lanier Islands. So they decided to sell off Lake Lanier Islands. They put out an investment offering to all the big resort companies that are out there. And by now, they were up to $20-something million in revenue annually. Hardly any interest. And the reason there wasn't a whole lot of interest was because of the uncertainty around two things. One, what the master plan looked like. And here, when we put this out, we had no master plan. And then two, the different levels of government that they had to contend with. And that was a concern with some of the companies, was that you had the federal government, which can be a scary creature to private business. You had the state they had to deal with, and then you had a state authority that you had to deal with as well. In the end, a very prominent business person picked it back up, as since then there's been $150 million invested up there in both private development and public infrastructure. And now there is immense interest. In fact, y'all probably heard Margaritaville, who's, fair disclosure, one of my clients. Margaritaville is now there operating their campground and their water park areas and so forth. And there's talk of right now building a 300+ room hotel up there, which would be a very, very sizable investment. So to answer your question, until you've got a master plan stamped by the federal government, it's a lot of talk to some people. And I heard that from a lot of your people here that were interested in investing. And until they saw a stamped master plan, they thought this was a lot of talk. And quite frankly, I never dreamed it would have taken this long. I'm very pleased that we reached the outcome that we did, but I will say that there was a lot of inconsistent application. There was a lot of inconsistent treatment. There was a lot of goalposts being moved throughout the process. But at the end of the day, we were able to achieve what I thought was a great outcome. There was one issue that we couldn't finalize related to the hotel that will have to be addressed before a hotelier takes any kind of sublease to develop the hotel. And I won't bore you with all that, but it's in the letter I sent you.
So I've got a question.
Sure.
I'm in a unique position. I'm new to this. I wasn't here when this was voted on 6 years ago, so I'm kind of drinking from the fire hydrant here on this. My question is so we go through this process. We agree to the terms of the lease. Okay, that doesn't really hold us accountable to actually moving forward with the project or with a specific lessee, right? We get to negotiate that. What does it look like if we can't come to an agreement with this current lessee that we kind of have on board, and we sit stagnant for 2 or 3 years as we're trying to go find people to invest, businesses to invest? What responsibility is it ours as the city? What does that look like essentially?
Well, DNR, it's unknown whether DNR would embrace this lease. In other words, if you weren't DNR's waiting on you to tell them that you're ready to proceed.
Okay.
And my suggestion to you is you not tell them that until you've worked out the campground operator's sublease. But assume that you have. At that point, you would tell DNR we're ready to proceed. DNR terminates the existing, I'm going to answer your question.
No.
They terminate the existing lease, and then they sign the master lease with the Corps, the 50-year lease with the Corps. This master plan gets attached to it. It's already been signed, the FONSI and all those kinds of things. Then you become the sublessee through your agreement with them. But if you never gave the signal to DNR that you want to move forward, then the question to DNR would be, would y'all still move forward under this master plan? And that's a big question. If I'm DNR, I would say absolutely, because anytime you have a more intrusive development plan, you can always pare it down, but you can't build it back up without going through that whole process again. So I can't answer whether DNR would embrace that master plan, much less if they'd actually pursue it. But there is a provision in the lease, a very unusual provision that the Corps put in there, which is if you or DNR, you're up the lease chain, did not pursue the master plan and make advancements on the master plan, then they can terminate the lease. But of course, I don't view that as a huge threat, because the worst that can happen is they close the park. Guess what? The park's already closed. And that's something that was lost on most people. So we've got a closed facility here, and we're willing to do something to reopen this thing and make it a great asset for.
And that does specify it has to happen for a specified term before they could exercise that, right?
It does.
In like 2 or 3 years?
It does. I think it was 3 years. And progress is pretty subjective, I guess.
Correct.
So kind of, we started off on a journey, long journey, right? Frustrating journey about 5.5 years ago to get this exact document. And we got it. And We do have somebody who's very eager to sign a sublease with us to operate the park and make improvements. We, without moving forward with some sort of a, vote to proceed to gather all the subleases and economic development study impact and return on investments, my personal opinion, we spend a lot of money to get a piece of paper, and we don't really know if the project would be successful or not without finding out if we can really make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of
I guess my
Fortunate.
comments there would be, when we first started this process, I put in writing what the estimate of this would be. It was 250 to 300,000. The council ended up deciding, you know what, let's just do 180,000 worth over so many months and see what kind of progress we make. And at that point, we had made progress and actually got an agreement with the Corps, negotiated a successful agreement with the Savannah District, which they then reneged on when it reached the headquarters office in DC. And that's what sent us on this 1.5-year journey. I say us, me, because what ended up happening was I took such great offense that I felt you had not been treated fairly. And I had not been treated fairly, quite honestly, in my negotiations with the Corps. That for the last 1.5 years, I've been doing this work for you at no cost. And so we now, I guess I was on a mission, and sometimes I'll do that. I'll make you my hobby if we don't get fair treatment. And now we finally got a lease. And I guess from your perspective, you spent essentially, John might know, 330. I don't know what the 330,000.
330.
I don't know.
It's 350 out there.
Okay. So you spent close to the estimate we had, but what you also have to ask yourself is, how much is shoreline property worth at Lake Hartwell? If you did the division on that, I think it's somewhere around $3,000 or $4,000 an acre that you're getting this place. And you still would have had.
Well, if you can't use it for that, it's not worth anything.
True statement. True statement. But I
Thanks
think,
to the Corps wasn't worth anything, was it?
what's that?
And thanks to the Corps, it's not worth anything right now.
Yeah, it's not worth anything yet.
Questions? So just again, circle back around. So we enter into this, we enter into this lease, sublease agreement, I guess, with the DNR. We now have this property for 50 years. We don't have to build out completely according to this master plan. It is just hey,
Progress.
you want to
Make progress.
just make progress. Does that clearly define what make progress is?
I'll send that to your lawyer, but I think it's very subjective. And I've never, ever seen the Corps terminate a lease for not pursuing a master plan. I've never seen it. Then they don't have the budget to take it back anyway.
Right. I mean, it could be cutting the grass, progress, or building.
Well, the state has gotten away with, for all these years, what little bit they've done, the minimal amount that they've done. So they've continued to make progress.
And so if we don't move on this,
If you don't move on it, then you've taken 300 and whatever the figure was and thrown it out the window. When in reality, you just got your leases. That's what you were pursuing, and you have your leases now. So in my judgment, what you have to make a decision on is, do you want to risk another 30-something thousand to finish the drill with the campground operator, and then you make the final decision, which right now I think should be the December meeting. Shouldn't be the reason why there should be a delay there.
Question.
What was that last thing you said, Sean?
Right now, the December meeting is the sequence I gave you.
Right, okay.
The December meeting is when we bring it back to you to make a decision.
do we have any public questions as related to Sean, how this works, opinions?
I want to voice my concern that I have with this. We have an awesome community. We have a community that, there's a certain reason why people move here, right? It doesn't look like the places from which they're moving from. We have a unique sort of family and community here, and my concern of mine is, does this change that? I keep hearing Lanier Islands thrown out there. That's awesome for Gainesville, and that's awesome for there, but what does it make sense for Hartwell? And as long as, I don't know, as long as we keep that in mind, I don't know, I'm fearful that we lose our identity in the process of reaching for something that could be grand. You know what I mean? I just had to get that out there.
And I appreciate that. And all these years, we've been working towards building the downtown, building the city, bringing in tourism, bringing in restaurants, bringing in retail. We've lost about 200,000 people coming to our community since the closure of that park. We were able to have 200,000 people come before. I don't think 200,000 people coming back is going to change our identity a whole lot. And I want to mention this list of people that have worked on this project at this stage in the game and thank them. There's Sean, who's, like I say, he's worked for almost a year and a half now. Gratis. Congressman Collins' office has about 3.5 years tied up on this. Joel Katz, this has been his personal baby for the last 3 years, and he has gone above and beyond, taking phone calls, working things out, trying to, literally has taken an act of Congress to get this thing done. At Archway, Archway has been involved with this. They've done projects, so the color schemes have already picked out the colors. I mean, the name of the park's picked out, the design of the park's picked out, and the marketing study for the park is ready to go. The city, Ken Listick and Dennis, David and John have spent countless hours walking the park, looking at ways they can lower the cost effectively, looking at the leases, looking at how we're going to do all of this. Barry Stern, who is the campground operator that we approved. We did a performer on him, looked at who he was. He's been approved to negotiate with us. This gentleman has come up here and 5 times at least, met us in Atlanta for negotiations, came up here and spent 2 or 3 weeks renting a place on his own dollar. He's gotten very involved with the Archway projects. Kathy Papai at the Department of Community Affairs has worked on this. The staff at Georgia Mountain Regional has worked on this. The Chamber has spent countless hours looking at the economic impact of this to the city. The DDA's looked at it, and the businesses that are downtown are wanting this to support them. The state DNR, has had someone involved in this process for the last 3 years. We went to the state DNR. David and I went down, and Sean went down. We met with state DNR. They voted at their director presented it to the board of directors there. They voted on it there, and they have supplied one individual that has been with this project all along. The Corps wanted them to be involved in all the negotiations, and the state has supplied that. I believe this is something that's good for our community. This is 147 acres that we've got experience with the state. We know how they've done it. This is good. This is a great asset for our community. We wanted something in tourism. We needed someplace on the lake. We're now on the lake. We have the leasee. That was our big thing, was that we go all through all of this, or we're going to be able to get the leasee. We got a leasee that's now been with us for over 3 years, working with us, coming up, visiting with us. We have other leasees that are interested. When the hotel's a prime example. I went to Paul Patel, who all of you know, and went to Paul and says, on this hotel, man, we need to get some your input on it. He said, about 6-7 years from now, when you get all this done, you come talk to me. And I thought he was kidding. But here we are, almost 6 years later. If you get to it, it's really longer than that. That we've actually been looking at it as a city. This is a great investment for us that we have people that are going to pay for it. So that's where I'm at with it. I would like to go over the lease, what we did get done in the lease. So if you don't mind, going that and doing the lease summary of all the things that we did get accomplished in this lease and what we have paid
Certainly.
for?
First and foremost, I guess I would say that the term of the lease was 50 years. That's critical. because they were only willing to give us 25 years initially. Second, I think I mentioned to you, Georgia DNR is the prime lessee, and then the city of Hartwell would be the sublessee. The type of lease that it is, it's a recreational lease. I described what that means, that it's not a commercial lease where the Corps actually takes a graduated rental income from the lessee, like a marina. Instead, it's recreation based, and so the interest that the Corps gets, the consideration the Corps gets, is just that the property's looked after.
Can you also touch on the state form of lease compared to the city form of
I
lease?
will, thank you. In fact, I mentioned that here in the letter as well. By going through the state, you get what's called a state form of lease. And what that essentially means is some of the things I threw out earlier. It gives you a lot more flexibility, where the Corps doesn't get involved in the architecture. The Corps doesn't get involved in engineering. It's basically, they're giving deference to the state. And so they're not going to be breathing down your necks and inspecting this or inspecting that, or suddenly telling you that this new permit applies or this new regulation applies. It's basically a hands-off to the state, and that's who they look to, is the state. So we were able to get a state form of lease. Initially, they were forcing us into a local government form of lease, which is much more difficult, and a lot more resources have to be expended to comply with those restrictions. And so we were fortunate to get a state form of lease as well. The development plan, I mentioned to you that they have signed the FONSI, the finding of no significant impact, for all the cabins, the high-end RV park, the hotel, the event venues, and the restaurant. No further NEPA documentation is required. That's actually in the letter that the Corps gave us. The site plan submittal process, I went through that with you there, that as long as it's showing on the master plan when you're ready to construct, you show what you're willing to construct, you show some detail around it, and they're not supposed to unreasonably withhold approval under the lease terms. The lease boundaries, this is important. The lease limits actually extend all the way to the shoreline. At one point, the Corps tried to get us to stop the lease boundaries shy of the shoreline and stop it at what's referred to as a spillway design flood stage level. That would have cut off an enormous amount of territory between there and the water. And it presented all kinds of legal issues, all kinds of insurability issues, and other things. So what we worked out there was the lease limits extend all the way to the shoreline. If you have a development off of the shoreline, like one of these docks or something, it then extends 100 feet automatically off of that, the new lease boundaries, without changing the lease or anything. So that was a critical negotiation point as well. Development along the shoreline, this came about as well, that same spillway issue I talked of. If you're going to try to construct a permanent, habitable dwelling where people are living and sleeping, then it has to be above the 674 elevation. And so that's why you'll see on this drawing, we no longer have cabins or anything below that line. Instead, you're allowed to do RVs and primitive camping and things like that below that line. That was an important point. The hotel remains in the development plan. It is subject to a market study update because it did not meet a market study approval when we did the market study the first time. The National Historic Preservation Act compliance, I spoke with you about the phase 1 study for that. Again, you can kick that off once you're comfortable you're moving forward with the whole project. The subleases, you can enter into subleases with for-profit operators. And again, the Corps cannot unreasonably withhold approval on those as well. I mentioned that earlier. There is a list of permitted uses in that document. I know it's a large lease, but the list of permitted uses actually tells you, subject to changes in the master plan, what it is you can do on this property. And so this master plan, all these uses are on that permitted use sheet. And there are additional uses that are on that permitted use sheet. It just means that if you wanted to actually use one of them, you'd have to go amend the master plan. But for now, everything you see on this is approved. It's already on the permitted use sheet and so forth. This was an interesting point here. It came up with me on another project. And that is that on this particular project that had come up on another Corps property, they couldn't get cellular communication hardly. Verizon was terrible. AT&T was terrible. Sprint, who was a big player at that time, Sprint was bad. And they were losing group business over it. And so what they were seeking to do was add some cellular on the property in order to boost the not just the cellular coverage, but broadband as well, because people were starting to use broadband over their phones and so forth. And we bumped up against an easement issue with the Corps as to whether or not we had the authority to do that. And make a long story short, what we worked out here with the Corps on the cellular issue, y'all are familiar with the 5G product, the issue. I know that y'all have had lots of discussion here about the legislation that went through the General Assembly in the last couple of years. And when 5G begins to roll out every couple hundred feet, whatever it is on the telephone poles, that small cell technology will be able to be brought through that park with the approval of the local office. And as long as it's not serving people or being designed to serve people that are outside the park, then we'll be able to do it under this lease. And that's a pretty big deal, I think, in terms of the high-end RVs and being able to do high-speed internet and so forth. I'll just mention the termination. If after 3 years no progress is made towards the development plan, then the Corps may terminate the lease. I won't go through the hotel provisions with you, it's in the law, but the provisions we were not able to get in there, what I would suggest to you, if you decide to move forward with the discussions with the campground operator based on these leases, that you also recognize there's not a need to go appeal that hotel mortgagee protection issue at this time until you get a hotel operator sitting there with money to spend. And that's when I would suggest to you to go appeal it. Now, that said, what's the risk? The risk there is you may not have an administration that's as friendly to real estate type issues as you do today. So who knows who will be in office then, but that's the risk you.
So 2 questions briefly, and then I think we need to either do something or hold serve and evaluate a little more. If we don't act tonight, up or down, does any of these documents or any of these discussions expire in the short term, like within the next few weeks, in case we want to pull back together for a work session or a called meeting to make more decisions or to think about it and stew on it? Can we?
I'm not aware of anything that, quote, expire. I will tell you that my work for you is
Once in a year.
My work for you is finished tonight, pro bono. Now, let me repeat that. So if you choose to do anything else, then you'll have to have a service provider on hand to help you with this.
Okay. So essentially, I think it's pretty plain. We've beat it to death.
I'm ready.
I mean, we either decide to expend the 40, 45 to get all the firm, solid answers and then make a educated decision, or we say no now and just say.
I would like to make a motion that we move forward with the negotiations with Barry and move forward with all the provisions that we need to up to $45,000 and have this stuff ready for January meeting to move forward.
Second that.
Got a motion by Councilman Haney, don't put you on it. Hicks to approve this expenditure. I'm assuming it'll come out of Economic Development Fund to gather the rest of the information needed to proceed or not. And I got a second by Councilman Garnella to do the same. Any public comment or questions? Any other comments from council?
Yeah, well, go ahead, Tony.
Now look, don't take on.
Well, I think this is a wonderful project. Some of y'all, if you follow the city council meetings, you will know that several months ago, I tried to make a motion that we exit the project. I said, we need to pack our bags and go home. That was the way I referred to it. But that was out of frustration that the thing was dragging on and on and on. And it's, we look at that, and obviously there's been a lot of work done. And if it were to come to fruition, I think it's going to be great. However, that being said, I don't think the city is the one that ought to be doing it. Number one, we don't have the knowledge. Number two, we don't have the finances. We've spent more than I ever thought we were going to spend. I know Sean said that's where he told us to start with, and I believe him. I just don't remember that. I remember the 180. I'm a little concerned about not knowing really how much more we're going to have to put in. Now, yeah, negotiating the subleases, we get it back over 10 years. But initially, we got to have some money from somewhere to do it. I mean, you don't put in a sewage line at 10 foot a month. You got to go put in the whole sewage line, and that may cost $300,000 or $400,000, and we're going to get paid that back over 10 years. Well, you know, if some of the projections have been, I've seen as high as $3 million to do the whole project, and then we've seen on just the campground portion as high as $700,000 to do the project, depending on what the campground owner were to ask for. Those numbers scare me because I know what the city's financial position is, and we're in good shape. Don't take that the wrong way. But if things didn't happen as we planned for them to happen, that could go south in a hurry. And we're not in as good a shape as we have been, but we're still in good shape. So that being said, I can't support this in pursuing it any further.
Mike, you got anything you want to add on?
And I think most of you know how I felt. I didn't vote for it in the beginning. Tony and I both didn't vote for it. I think state park's a great idea, a great plan. Everything's wonderful. But I'm like Tony, the city of Hartwell, I can't commit the city taxpayers to a 50-year lease of not knowing what the future is. And it's just, we got to do a fire department. We have police, water, sewer. We got to upgrade the sewer plant. We have so many obligations already that I just can't commit the taxpayer. Now, if the taxpayer wants to take it to a vote and they say they want it, I'm all for it. But what I'm hearing in the community, and I may be hearing all the negatives, but I'm hearing they don't want us to be involved in the state park. So I can't support it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And Trey and everybody knows how I felt from the very beginning in the last 5.5 years.
Any public comment or questions or input you may have?
I'd like to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
So as the newbie to this whole thing, you know, my concerns are the same as y'all's. We've all discussed this. I just think maybe it's because I have a fresh set of eyes, and 6 months ago I was feeling a little bit different about it. But now that we're faced with an opportunity, I think at this point we at least owe it to the taxpayers that have invested this much money so far, for in comparison to what's already been spent, not much more money to see if this is actually viable. That doesn't mean that we have to go through and follow through with it, correct?
That's right.
It's just to see if it's a viable option. So I think we at least owe that, whether you agree with it, whether I agree with it or not, or whether I agree with their initial vote to have it, you know, the project started or not. But here we are, and we have an opportunity to see if it's a good thing for the community. So that's kind of how I.
Mr. Mahan, how you doing? What you got in your?
I'm here representing the Park Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the executive committee, and I chair the economic development committee of the Park Chamber. And we've been involved with this at a support level for quite some time. And we feel like it's time that we've got the opportunity now to really take hold of this and move it forward. And to pass this up means that we are, I think, losing probably the best opportunity we've had for economic development in this county in maybe the lifetime of the county. And I know it's risky, I know there's chances, but you know, without risk, there is no gain. And I'm just wondering at the time that the city went into the gas business, was that risky at the time? Was it risky when they went into the water business? But this is a different situation, it's a different time. Representing the Park Chamber of Commerce, I'd just like to say that we're for this. We feel like it can do a lot for this community economically. And we have a fine city out there, Lake Hartwell, that we really should take full benefit of. And now we have the opportunity to do that. And I'd just like to see the council support.
Jerry, while I agree with you, the problem, while I agree with everything you said, the problem is that we just spent $5 million at the water treatment plant. We're about to spend $5 million at the sewage treatment plant. I don't know how flush y'all think the city is, but it's not that flush in money. And, it comes down to a fiduciary decision. And it's not that I'm against the park. I'm not. I'll support it 100%. I'm just saying the city is not the one that should be doing it. If the county was doing it, I'd be glad. I'd support handing everything we've done off to the county and let them run with it. But you're not going to get them to do it either. And so my point is, it's all about the dollars. There's enough uncertainty here for me not to feel comfortable enough knowing what we're fixing to spend $5 million at the sewage plant. We just found out today we're going to spend $70,000 on just a fix on the gas line. And those kind of things occur all the time. And so we get about $600,000 a year in SPLOST money. Well, $600,000 doesn't go far. We're already using part of that to pay for the water treatment plant. And if that SPLOST doesn't pass the next time, then that's got to go to the taxpayer. So please understand, those of us, at least me, that's opposed to it, it's not that we think it's a bad thing. We do. We think it's a great thing. But I wish somebody other than the city would be the ones doing it. I can't support that.
What you see here is a group of men that have different opinions. And at the end of the day, we walk out of here, we're friends. And it's the absolute truth. Well, this is constitutional republic or democracy or whatever you want to call it. This is what it is.
You'll be able to walk out of here?
I hope so. It depends. We need to hurry up. All right, I got a motion in second to approve this next expenditure up to $45,000 on economic development, to execute subleases, get our finances in order of how this could happen, how it would pay for itself, so that then we would have to make that final decision to proceed. Okay? All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? 4-2. We're moving forward. Mr. Davis? December. Yes, sir. That's a long way to go to Atlanta. All right. Mr. Davis has kind of put himself on the clock of December. Get the agenda ready, John. No, okay, January. Okay, whatever.
January is signing.
Oh, okay. All right. We do appreciate all your work, and we do appreciate what it's going to take to get us to this next step. Okay, moving on. We've done a lot of real estate tonight, haven't we, guys? So this is the next step. This is item number 7, I think, is what it's officially going to be. Chicago Steakhouse Purchase Agreement. Council, you remember several, what was it, a year and a half, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
We made an agreement with Sharif, who owns Chicago Steakhouse, that he wanted to have the ability to have outside dining. He wanted to have that corner developed and new, and it looks fantastic. Good job to everybody involved. And there were some parts of that agreement that we need to now ratify and put in place. One is Mr. Sharif is going to pay $40,000.
That's right, over 10 years.
Over 10 years, back to the city in exchange for, I guess, what is it?
It's the upper part of the sidewalk.
Where the canopy's over, where his seats are going to be.
That's correct.
And on the other side.
And on the other side. And this has to be,
The council has to pass it contingent on the DDA passing it.
all right, so Rob, the DDA is going, they're part of the transaction, right?
Correct.
Because we cannot sell public property to a private individual without a DDA involved. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're going to transfer the DDA. What you're approving tonight would just be an intergovernmental agreement that would confirm the procedure and the general terms under which the DDA would subsequently transfer to Mr. Fahan, and then we'll prepare the documents to allow all those transfers to occur to him, and the note and documents from him confirming the commitment to make the payments.
All right, well, this is obviously a little bit out of the usual, that's everything we're doing lately, out of the ordinary. This is a different way to skin the cat, as they say. We're very excited about Sharif and what he's done, his major investment in community. And this was a long time in the making. But now that everything's finished and buttoned up, we need to do this. What does the motion need to say, Mr. Leverett?
Just, someone needs to move that we approve the proposed intergovernmental contract between the DDA and the city, providing for the transfer of property to Mr. Farhan under the terms that are set forth in that.
And where does the
So moved.
$40,000, where does that money go? Does it go back in general? Does it go in economic development?
It was pay with SPOS,
So it needs to go back into SPOS.
It'll be going back into
All right.
SPOS.
Got a motion by Councilman Hicks to execute all those necessary documents. Jason, do you have any concerns at all at this point from your crowd, DDA?
No, this is economic development, and the DDA's job is economic development.
I got a second by Councilman Haney to approve that agreement. Any public comment or questions? All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? It was a good, ended up being very good. Item number 7. Man, I like this clapping crowd. We get soul in here.
Y'all come back next time.
No. We start buying equipment, clap every time for us.
Mayor,
Encouraging.
Jason, don't leave. We got a new job, another new job for you.
yeah,
Item number 7, John.
this is a budgeted item for the fire department.
All right, fire department,
Their
breathing apparatus.
We want
It
to
is
maintain
budgeted.
that to ISO reading, guys. So
Yeah.
this is just pretty normal equipment for them.
Yeah.
And they're on schedule. We budgeted for it. So.
John, do we have an expenditure on that? It looks like our quote is for $25,601.88. This is budgeted as part of the fire department's annual purchases.
That's correct.
Can I get a motion to approve?
Move that we approve.
Motion by Councilman Kraft to approve the expenditure for breathing apparatus for our outstanding fire department, $25,601.88 to be out of the budget. Yes, sir. You have a question? Got a motion by Councilman Griggs, a second by Councilman McNabb. Is that what?
No, Councilman
Griggs.
Griggs was saying. Arthur made
Oh,
that.
okay. I'm excited. Councilman Kraft agrees. Made the motion, second by Councilman Griggs. Any public comment regarding fire department purchase of a breathing apparatuses? All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Item number 8 is,
This happened.
guys, I do want to mention something to you here. Item number 8, Evie's Run is October 19th. This is a reoccurring fundraiser, 5K. Cecil Merritt, who has been over cross country, called me and asked that they take the cross country 5K out of the sanctioned event list. They want to substitute Evie's Run into the sanctioned event, okay? Stan, any concerns at all with anything that's went on in that in the last few years? Okay. Can I get a motion to do exactly that? Motion by Councilman Haney to approve. Second. Evie's Run on October 19th and add it to the sanction list in replacement of the cross-country event. A second by Councilman Hicks. Any public comment, questions? All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? None. Moving on to item number 9 is homecoming parade. This is the annual event. Same route. Any problems, Stan? No concerns? My understanding is this is part of the sanction list?
That's correct.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Got a motion by Councilman Griggs, second by Councilman Kraft, to approve the homecoming parade. I believe it's the Thursday before homecoming, Friday night. The 25th, my resident specialist in the back told me, the 25th, okay? Any questions? Can I get a motion to approve? Motion by Councilman McNabb to approve the homecoming parade on that 25th. Second by Councilman Haney. Any public questions? All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? City manager's comment, he don't have any? No, just go ahead, John.
Do you want me to update on
Just briefly, go quick.
We're 85% complete. That includes additional work that we've added onto it. We're lacking 4 curb extensions, the parking lot, and the associated stormwater system that goes within the parking lot. We're 90% done with the stormwater, and we're 85% done with sanitary sewer, and 70% of the sidewall replacement along both north and south sides of Depot Street. Additionally, the contractor has completed his portion of the Heart Cafe corner.
So yeah, it looks great. If anybody's hasn't been down through there, go slow because it's still working, but it really looks great. So you can imagine we get that new road paved in there, new lines. It's going to be fabulous.
Do we have a completion date we're shooting for? I know it's been moved up.
We that's sort of fluid right now, Councilman. But we anticipate this thing to be done ahead of schedule. I will say that.
Do we do ribbon cuttings on roads?
You know what, Mayor, supposedly there's,
Oh, okay, I forgot. We got
supposedly there's a monster mash or something. I mean, I don't know.
Hey, don't commit us to it.
Okay.
But anyway, thanks, John, for all the hard work. You've done a good job of keeping them on task. It looks good down there.
Thank
Council comments? Councilman Hicks?
I'm just thrilled.
I bet you are. I bet
We
you
have
are.
worked as a community and
Councilman Garnella.
And-
I'm moving on.
Move on.
I don't need to hear this. We heard 20 minutes of you.
You guys are in
already.
a clapping mood. Can we give our fearless city manager a
There you go.
He feels like utter junk tonight. Sick.
I'm not in love with Patrick. He's
He looks jealous because he is.
He may have the flu. We don't know.
We don't know, but
We hope not.
no, we're good.
Councilman McNabb, anything?
Thank y'all.
Councilman Haney?
If you haven't, Miss Jean Turner's been helping us out somehow. Janet was out for a short period of time. We've got.
I'll give her.
Pictures, yeah, we get Janet back too. We've got pictures of all the past mayors of the city of Hartwell hanging on the wall in this conference room in here. If you're interested in historical kind of stuff, you might want to go in there. But some of them are hand-drawn, of course, back years ago. But it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's
I'll go in there
pretty
and see how many of
pretty
you
awesome.
know.
The one in the corner, if you're looking at it, it's pretty ugly.
Yeah. Big old beard. I got work to do. Councilman Kraft, anything? Councilman Griggs?
No, sir.
All in favor to adjourn? Can I get a motion? Motion by Councilman Haynes, second by Councilman Kraft. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Thank you for laboring with us tonight.